There are three fundamental principles on which the science of fingerprinting is based. Firstly, fingerprints individualize a person. No two persons have got same fingerprints. Secondly, the fingerprints remain unchanged from birth till death. And thirdly, fingerprints can be classified. The purpose of classification is to work out a mathematical formula by which a person can be identified. By changing the hairstyle, by changing the dress code, by changing the religion, a person can very easily change the appearance. Before the classification system came into being, a small photograph of the convict was attached in the crime record office. However, that proved futile because, as I said, the appearance can be very easily changed. The criminals also have many aliases. A person commits a crime in Delhi with one name and then goes to Kanpur and commits another crime and he registers his name as something else. But the classification formula of fingerprinting is so absolute that whatever he does, his final answer, which comes out of that mathematical quotation, that does not change. A matter of pride for we Indians is that this classification formula was invented by Indians and in India. The world's first fingerprint bureau was established in Calcutta, which we now call Kolkata, in 1897. There were two Indian officers, Azizul Haq and Hemchandra Bose, who were working on the fingerprint classification system. They came out with that formula, which is still being used in all the civilized nations of the world. Unfortunately, their officer, Inspector General Edward Richard Henry, took the credit of their invention. These persons were mere sub-inspectors. The officer was Inspector General of Police. Following the strict discipline, they could not say anything to him, but he hoodwinked them, and the classification formula still bears his name. It's called Henry's method of fingerprint classification. But I'm very sure with the advent of time, the credit due to Azizul Haq and Hemchandra Bose will also be coming, and we hope very soon the fingerprint classification system will be renamed as Henry, Huck and Bose system of fingerprint classification.
Dear students, after studying this module, you shall be able to learn and know about the history of fingerprint examination and will come to learn about the classification system of fingerprint and will be able to identify the various classifying characteristics of fingerprint. Now, let us start with the introduction. A fingerprint is an impression formed by the friction ridges present on a human finger. We have studied in the earlier modules that it is an individual characteristic, and also according to the principle of fingerprint, every fingerprint is unique. No two fingers have yet been found to have the same ridge patterns. A fingerprint will remain unchanged during an individual's lifetime, and fingerprints have general ridge patterns that can be systematically classified. The three classes of fingerprints are loops, whorls, and arches. The innumerable lines present in the palmar surface that constitute a fingerprint are commonly referred to as the ridge characteristics or minutiae. The fingerprint pattern present on the human fingers are unique, detailed, and cannot be altered, and that's why they are used as long-term markers for human identity. Fingerprints retrieved from the scene of crime are used as an important tool in forensic science. Fingerprint analysis has been used to identify suspects and solve crimes for more than 100 years, and it remains an extremely valuable tool for the law enforcement. One of the most important uses for fingerprints is to help investigators link one crime scene to another involving the same person. Fingerprint identification also helps investigators to track a criminal record, their previous arrests and convictions, to aid in sentencing, probation, parole, and pardoning decisions. Now, let us have a look on history of fingerprint identification system. According to the evidences present, the Chinese used fingerprints to sign legal documents. However, it is not sure that this practice was carried out as a part of ceremonial custom or was used as a means of personal identification. Also, years before Battalion began work on the system, Sir William Herschel, an English civil servant positioned in India, acquired finger patterns of the natives to sign their contracts. Herschel's motives of using fingerprints remained unclear, and nothing was published about his activities until Henry Fuld, a Scottish physician, published his views on the importance of using fingerprints in the field of personal identification. In a publication of 1880, Fuld suggested that the human ridge patterns can be employed in the field of criminal investigation. He was not only convinced that they offer an infallible means of identification, but also offered to set up a bureau of fingerprints at the Scotland Yard so as to test the practicability of fingerprints. However, by this time the battalion system had been readily accepted, and hence Fall's offer was rejected. About 2 decades later, another Englishman, Sir Francis Galton, did an extensive research on the science of fingerprints that provided the much needed stimulus, and the police agencies began recognizing the value of fingerprints. The book named Fingerprints was published by Galton in the year 1892, in which he wrote about the fundamental principles of fingerprints while categorizing them into three classes such as arches, whorls, and loops. The British government adapted fingerprints as an appendage to the battalion system on the insistence of Galton. With developments taking place in the field of fingerprinting, the next major task was to have a classification system that would solve the problem of filling numerous fingerprints in a logical and searchable sequence. Dr. Juan Vucetich, an Argentine police officer, worked out a concept in the year 1891. Although the classification system devised by Vucetich has been refined over the years, is used by many Spanish speaking countries. Another fingerprint classification system was proposed by Sir Edward Richard Henry in the year 1897, which was adopted by Scotland Yard 4 years later. Today, the United States and many English speaking countries rely on Henry's system of classifying fingerprints for the filling purposes. Now, let me tell you something about the 10-digit fingerprint classification system. The original classification system, as proposed by Henry, took into consideration all the fingers and converted the rich patterns present on them in the form of letters and numbers that could be easily arranged in the form of a fraction. The system adopted by the Scotland Yard in the year 1901 could only accommodate files of up to 100,000 sets of prints, And as the number of collections grew in size, it was necessitated to expand the existing classification. In US, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, faced with the difficulty of ever growing number of collections of set of prints, expanded the 10-digit fingerprint classification system by adding extensions. These revisions are collectively termed as the FBI system and are widely used by most of the crime investigating agencies in the United States today. In order to appreciate the value of classification, one might imagine a large reference library in which all the topics are filed by the last name of the author. Anyone wishing to locate a topic by subject alone would be faced with an impossible task. Library filing systems, however, enable one to find a topic quickly without knowing the author's name. Similarly, using the Henry classification system, a John Doe set of fingerprints could be searched and located in the file. Positive identification of criminals with or without reliable names had entered a new era. In the Henry system, sets of fingerprints were given a primary classification based on the distribution of patterns in the fingers. There are 1024 possible primary segments in their database, and further extensions were achieved by assessing the specific features of each digit. In order to conduct a search, subject fingerprints were classified in exactly the same manner as those in the database. Only the segment bearing the same classification required individual comparison to determine identity. The Henry system allowed for the filing and searching of entire sets of fingerprints, but was not useful in the search of individual cold crime scenes impressions. The Batley system was developed to address this need. At time of arrest, an extra set of fingerprints was taken on a serrated form. Each digit was classified, first by pattern type and then by other extensions. The individual digits were then separated and filed. A crime scene impression was examined to determine the most probable digit, classified and searched. Thus, in the 10-digit classification system, the 10-digit fingerprint slip is analyzed under the following 7 classification system. Number 1, primary classification. Number 2, major division classification. Number 3, secondary classification. Number 4, subsecondary classification. Number 5, second subsecondary classification. Number 6, final classification. And the last one, which is number 7, is key classification. Now, let us have a detailed look on primary classification system. The primary classification takes into consideration all 10 fingers, and the system is used by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to lessen down the possible number of suspects. The occurrence of arches is 5 to 10%, and that of loops and whorls are 60 to 65% and 30 to 35% respectively. Also, the frequency of plain and tinted arches and composite patterns is relatively low in comparison to the frequency of loops and whorls. Thus, for the purpose of primary classification system, plain and tinted arches have been grouped under the loops types along with radial and ulnar loops, and the composite patterns have been grouped under the whorl types. The 10 fingers of two hands are grouped into 5 pairs in the following manner: pair 1, right thumb and right index; pair 2, right middle and right ring; pair 3, right little and left thumb; pair 4, left index and left middle; pair 5, left ring and left little. The second part of each pair is taken in for numerator, while the first part of each pair is taken for denominator. 1. Considering the first pair, the possible combination of the patterns existing could either be a loop or a whirl on the right thumb. Similarly, the right index could show these two patterns only. Therefore, the possible combination of patterns on the first pair would be loops by loops, whirls by whirls, loops by whirls, and then whirls by loops. Hence, the given possible combinations will also hold true for pair 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, in all 1024 combinations are possible. These 1024 combinations could be represented in a chart having 32 into 32 cabinets arranged horizontally and vertically, which could provide location for all combinations of loops and whirls of the 10 digit taken in 5 pairs. For practical purposes, different numerical values have been assigned to the patterns according to their occurrence in different pairs. The loops have a zero value in primary classification system, whereas the whirl are assigned certain numerical values according to their occurrence in different pairs. When all the 10 fingers possess whirls on assigning the numerical values, the arrangement of primarily formula would be 16 by 16 plus 8 by 8 plus 4 by 4 plus 2 by 2 plus 1 by 1. But under such conditions, when the patterns on all the digits are loops, then the situation would be 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0. The 5 pairs provide 1024 possible combinations, and the numerical value totals out to be 31 by 31 in case of whirls and 0 by 0 in case of loops. So, a value of 1 is added to both the numerator denominator so that the final figure becomes 32 by 32 for whirls and 1 by 1 for loops. Hence, the complete primary formula will fluctuate between 1 by 1 to 32 by 32. Now, let us understand the primary classification system with the help of an example. If a whirl was found on the right index finger and the right middle finger, 16 by 0 plus 0 by 8 plus 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0 plus 0 by 0. If we add 1 to the top and bottom, we end up with a fraction of 17 by 9. Therefore, we can eliminate all suspects that do not have this fraction, and a single suspect can be individualized from this fraction. Now, let us have a look on extensions to primary classification system. Let us start with major division classification system. In this system, right and left thumb fingers are considered. This division is formed by counting the ridges in loop patterns, and for the whirl pattern, ridge tracing is considered. The value of right thumb is taken as numerator and the left thumb taken as denominator. In case of the presence of loops, To perform the ridge counting, the number of ridges cut by an arbitrary line joining core and delta are counted, and hence are denoted by I, M, O types, where the I type denotes the number of ridges up to 12, M type denotes the number of ridges between 13 to 19, and O type denotes the number of ridges between 20 or more. For arches, plain and tinted arch will always be considered under type 1 as they do not have any ridge count. For whorls, the ridge tracing is performed by tracing the basal radian of left and right tri-radius. O-type is valid for accidental, central pocket and double loops. Then comes secondary classification system. In secondary classification system, the patterns appearing on the right and left index fingers are considered, wherein the right index is taken as numerator and left index is taken as denominator. The types of patterns identified under this system are A, T, U, R, W, C, S, X, where these connotations implies arches, tented arches, ulnar loops, radial loops, whorls, composites, double loops, and accidental, respectively. The third is sub-secondary classification system. In this system, the patterns appearing on the left and right index, middle, and ring fingers are analyzed. It can be performed in two ways. One, lettered group, and the second type is ridge counting and ridge tracing. Let us discuss letter group in more detail. If A, which is arches, and T, which is tented arches, and R, that is radial loops, appear on the middle and ring finger, then this method is employed. The patterns appearing middle and ring fingers of the right hand is taken as numerator and are denoted by small letters, and the patterns appearing on the fingers of left hand are taken as denominators, and no connotation is used, whereas for the index fingers of both the hands respectively, the patterns appearing are denoted by capital connotations, such as in this example. The above given patterns can be denoted by A, T, R by W. In case of loops, ridge counting is done in the following manner. For whorls, ridge tracing is carried out in the same way as in major division classification system. Next is second subsecondary classification system. It is used when under the sub-secondary classification system, ridge counting and ridge tracing is employed and is based on the UCWSX patterns present on middle and right fingers. The patterns on the right are taken as numerator and the left are taken as denominator. Then comes final classification system. The value of final classification system is arrived at by counting the number of ridges in case of loop on the right and left little fingers and placing them as numerators and denominators respectively. In case of whorls, also, ridge counting is performed in a manner in which for right little finger, ridge counting is performed between the left tri-radius and core, and for the left little finger, ridge counting is done between right tri-radius and core. Ridge count of plain arch is taken as 1. In case of double loops, ascending core is taken as constant for ridge counting and descending core is not considered. And the last one is key classification system. It involves the ridge counting of loops or whorl patterns appearing on the right thumb only. Pattern is represented by small alphabets. In case of right thumb, the left delta is considered. Now, let us summarize this chapter. In this chapter, we have learned that a fingerprint is an impression formed by the friction ridges present on a human finger. Apart from that, in this chapter, we have come to know that fingerprint analysis has been used to identify suspects and solve crimes for more than 100 years, and it remains an extremely valuable tool for law enforcement. Then we have come to know that Dr. Juan Vucetich, an Argentinian police officer, worked out a concept in the year 1891. Another fingerprint classification system was proposed by Sir Edward Richard Henry in the year 1897, and in the Henry system, sets of fingerprints were given a primary classification based on the distribution of patterns in the fingers. Extensions were added to the Henry system of classification by the FBI. Then, in this chapter, we have learned that in the 10-digit classification system, the 10-digit fingerprint slip is analyzed under the following 7 classification system. Number 1, primary classification. Number 2, major division classification. Number 3, secondary classification. Number 4, subsecondary classification. Number 5, second subsecondary classification. Number 6, final classification. And the last one, key classification.